Welcome to our 7th Paranormal Native Crossroads with the Paranormal Rangers. So I'd like to introduce them. We have the delightful Michele Meiners, we have Stan, and we have John. I'd also like to introduce my co-host tonight. I've got Andrew Bartsitz and Del Tobin.
Hello, hey everyone. Everybody. How's it going? Here again.
Hi, everybody. How are we all?
I'm doing great.
Well, I always love these shows. We learn so much from these three guys. Tonight, we're going to delve into the history of the Navajo Nation. So before we do that, I'd just like to let you all know about something very exciting that's happening in June in York in the UK. So we've got a big event going on involving these three guys here, the Paranormal Rangers. So I think it will be their first time in York. So we're really looking forward to welcoming them over to York in the summer. And they're going to be doing a 4-day event. And we're going to be doing our combined healing therapies. So, Michele, did you want to say anything about the event that you'll be doing?
Sure. What we're going to be doing is teaching people how to investigate paranormal style. We will have kits that are going to be put together, so they'll have access to tools that will assist them in the field. And we will teach them about safety, traditions, and culture.
Wonderful. I think it's going to be a really exciting 4 days. I think we're going to have 2 days in the Hotel Mercure in York, where you'll be doing the like a seminar where I think we're going to hear some of your lovely stories, and we're going to be talking to you, and you'll be doing training. And then, as Michele says, we'll go out into the field and use the equipment that will come as part of the package that the paranormal are giving you. So all details are actually on the website. We'll pop that. Maybe we've got a barcode, Joel, I'm not sure, to pop up in a minute. Or you can contact twofeathersmedicine.com/combined healing. Paranormals also have a website, the paranormalrangers.com. And if in doubt, please email any one of us. We'll put that up later too, so we can give you the information. But this is an absolutely unique opportunity to interact with the Paranormal Rangers, chat to them over dinner, spend 4 days with these guys. And there's really, between them, there's nothing they don't know about the Navajo Nation, about the history, about the rituals, things they use, and where they're going. So we're all very keen to put the Navajo Rangers, the Paranormal Rangers, on the map. And other than that, there's also the paranormal side of that as well. These guys have been involved with different UFO sightings, Bigfoot, many experiences they have had that they can share with you as well during these 4 days. So we'll also be doing combined. We're doing 2 days of a sacred feminine retreat, and we're doing 5 days of our combined healing. So please have a look at what we're doing on any of the websites, and come and join us, because we'd love to see you all there. Okay, so tell us something. Where are we going to start on the history, guys?
Jonathan, why don't you speak into that?
Okay. One of the things that I've noticed growing up is that when you take history classes, when you're in grade school, you're taught, Columbus was this explorer that came over and discovered America. And it goes from there. It just keeps going on and on and on. And we're finding more and more that the history that we've been taught all this time is not necessarily true, or it's not the full story, but it's very one-sided. We've been told that the Columbus came over on the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria. Well, believe it or not, those ships' names are incorrect. They came over. The Santa Maria was a ship. The Nina and the Pinta were nicknames for ships. That wasn't their actual name. Offhand, I don't remember what the names were, but the Pinta in Spanish is a word describing a prostitute. So, you know, and these guys actually got lost. They were in the Caribbean and they thought we hit it, we made it to India. And therefore they called the natives Indians. And they enslaved a whole island. They killed a whole bunch of people, wiped out populations through disease, through warfare, um, and that's all been lost. Stories about Thanksgiving, where Thanksgiving came from. A lot of people don't realize that at that time, um, there was an Indian village, native village that was wiped out completely. Every man, woman, child was killed, and they and at the end of that, they celebrated Thanksgiving because they ridded themselves of the savages, and historical wise, the word savage is still included in the Constitution of the United States. And it talks about the savages. Just so everybody understands, savage was a term that was actually used to describe people who had no written history system. So it goes on and on and on. Later on, we had anthropologists that would come through to study Native Americans. So, how did they do this? Well, they collected human remains, which are still locked in museums today. Um, even after the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act was brought through, a lot of museums still have not returned human remains to Indian tribes. Um, but these people came across and they studied. And one of my tribes, I'm part Navajo, I'm part Cheyenne, I'm part what they call Apache Tribe of Oklahoma, which are Plains Apaches. They're related to the Mescalero and the Jicarilla in language. This tribe, they called them Kiowa Apaches because they camped right next to the Kiowa camp. They didn't speak the same languages. They did not intermarry between the tribes. They were completely separate. But what they did is actually really smart. The Kiowa Apaches or the Apache tribes, they were so small. They were over 3,000, and the Kiowas were a big tribe, and they were good in warfare. So the Apaches decided, hey, we're going to camp next to them and be safe. So they were just known to be with them all the time. And so here the anthropologists come and they say, they're next to the Kiowas, so we'll call them Kiowa Apaches. And the name was given, and that was it. So we have a lot of historical references that were made for us. Names are another thing, a whole nother subject. People went to boarding school. They were given names by the boarding school staff, just arbitrarily. You're Smith. You're John. Your last name is whatever. So we have Washingtons. We have we have all kinds of people um, Grants, everything else, all the old names. I knew a guy that was actually named Bronco Nagurski. Bronco Nagurski was one of the four horsemen that played football back in the 1930s for college. And so these guys were known as the Four Horsemen. I guess defense, the apocalypse, right? And somebody named this kid, your name is Bronco Nagurski, and I thought that was just so cool. Um, so there's a lot of misinformation out there, and just understand we're not going to straighten out the world. We're not going to, you know, do anything like that. We're just giving you some food for thought. And we have a history of distrust of the U.S. government, yet our natives are probably the first people to volunteer for the military. On Navajo, we have a huge number that join the Marines because of the Navajo code talkers.
Mhm.
And so there's just all kinds of information. Um, but more natives, across the United States join the military because they have a warrior tradition. And instead of going out and stealing horses or fighting the local enemies, you go into the military and you fight enemies of our country. So it's kind of the same thing. That's what we were there for.
You know, it's really it's really interesting, Jonathan, when you talk about the different tribal um, lineages that we each come from. We all have our different oral stories, and oral stories were very specific in our history of who we are. Jonathan depicted who he was and the lineage that he came from. My lineages, I am Navajo, half, and the other two lineages I have are Pawnee, Skidee, and Chippewa, Ojibwe. One and the same. They're interchangeable. What was really interesting about history with these tribes, there were uh, over 300 languages when Columbus came over that were spoken by the Native Americans on this side. And those have been obliterated, most of them, except every, tribe has their own dialect and tribal language still that has been preserved. Again, we all have our own oral histories from our lineages that have been handed down all the way from the creation story all the way down to what we're studying today, the paranormal and, ufology, so on and so forth. But it was really interesting when Columbus came over. Yes, he did get lost and thought this was East Asia, and found uh, tribes but it was the diseases that caused a lot of the obliteration of Native Americans. And when it started to be established here in North America, it was very intentional at some point that we be diminished in our numbers and that occurred through disease and hunger and removal from our lands that were once profitable for our nations. The Kiowa was really interesting, are the best horse people out there. Quanah Parker, his oral history, is one of your famous ancestors who was a political leader and was loved by both the non-Indigenous and Indigenous people of his time. What's so fascinating is Native Americans have been reduced to 574 registered federal tribes, and there are tribes still not registered to this day that exist in North America. So we all, have very unique backgrounds to the history. We do believe that the the Native American indigenous cultures were here somewhere between 20,000 and 30,000 years ago. Archaeologists, I mean, we've got two histories going on. We've got our oral histories and the history of science in archaeology and genetics. So, so we're telling two different stories, But because ours wasn't written, we did do a show on petroglyphs and other rock formation art. And but we can't entirely interpret that. I think it was Stan who said, or Jonathan who said that it was the language of that time where they were talking to each other through, this pictorial way of communication. Because we did not have a written language and we were big on the oral. And that's why the language is so beautifully needs to be preserved. And we've lost a lot of those 300 languages that I spoke into.
So can I just ask, so with like when you grow up in America and you go to school, is it like compulsory that they learn about the native culture in history, or is it up to them? Is there anything in school where, or is it what's it like at school for someone going into like elementary school? Do they get taught Native American history at all, or?
It's not taught at all.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah,
we're cast as the villains. Growing up, I always wanted to be the cowboy because the Indians always got killed. Yeah, I mean, unfortunate, but and a cowboy hat didn't look good on me. So, but you run into a lot of stigmas. Hollywood has romanticized the cowboy and made it look so, wonderful. Oh, rides into the sunset and all this stuff, carries a 6 gun. And we were, our people were fighting for survival, literally fighting for survival against systematic genocide. And the joke out here is that even today, if we go to the hospital is probably technologically 20 years behind everywhere else.
Mhm.
We get government hospitals, we get Indian Health Service, U.S. U.S. Indian Health Service, and what's kind of funny about it is you need to self-diagnose and know exactly what's wrong with you and go in and tell them this is what I need. Otherwise, the joke here is that they'll give you a couple of aspirin and say, "Well, take some aspirin, and if it gets worse, come back." Is the line? So we say, "Well, they must still be trying to get rid of us." you know, um, so there's a lot of humor. When you're put down and suppressed as much as you are, shows that come out like Reservation Dogs. Um, the humor in there is spot on. Um, you know, Skoden, meaning let's go. There's all kinds of little slang words in there. The spirit that shows up, just
But
the one that
that humor's a survival tool.
yeah, it is, and you learn it fast. But getting into the oral history, the Navajo have a tradition that goes back and says that they first, there was darkness. There's a world of darkness,
Mhm.
and that the next world came up, and it was more of an aquatic world with water everywhere. There's a succession of worlds. Depending on which medicine man you talk to, it could be 4 worlds or 5 worlds. But the Navajo people came through these different worlds, and at one point, they come into another world of giants and insects, and the the people can communicate with them. There's first man, there's first woman, there's the hero twins. So in Navajo tradition, if your family has twins, that's considered a blessing. Um, and it goes on, and then we see a hole in the sky. They put a couple of reeds up there and climb up into what they call the shining world, which is this world. And so, according to Navajos, uh, we've always been here. It's not like you know, and me and Stan have discussed this many times. We're always trying to discover what is the reason for certain things happening, certain things that go on. And we came up with the idea that this that this this whole thing has, I don't know, it's could be dimensional. That these things the coming through the different worlds, the dimensions are the only thing that would truly explain it. And so we started heading on that direction. And we finally got to the point where where we came up with this theory of dimensions that, and it covered everything. It covered every phenomenon. And we
So
have not found anything.
the journey of the stories to the myth go through multiple dimensions, worlds, eras of world's history, until you arrived at Earth in an underground scenario, and then were birthed on the surface of the world.
Well, the idea is that we were in a world that had sky and water and everything else, and we saw a hole in the sky. And when we climbed through that hole, we came into this world. So it's not necessarily coming through the ground. We think it was a dimensional gate, where they just transitioned to this world as a people.
Okay.
And
One
and
way or another, you went from one place to another, and it's not a matter of through something. There was a change in frequency from one place to being a new place.
right. And what's interesting is that other tribes have similar stories
Yes.
of appearing here, of coming here. And most tribes in their languages call themselves the people. The Navajo called themselves Dene, which means the people. Um, the Fremont and the Utes called them An Navajo, which in their language meant the ones who till. So, because Navajos were very agrarian and grew crops. So, and interestingly enough, the way they tilled their field was to make a spiral in the
Ah,
field to grow the crops. And that's really old knowledge. And it's interesting how that spiral keeps popping up over and over consistently.
So, is the term starseed something that the Navajo or Native Americans would have used related to how you came to Earth, or is that something that you've been labeled later?
As far as I know, the idea of star people have come through the Navajo, that they were contacted by other beings, what they're considered holy people, um, who came to them from the sky or from the stars. And so these are the Yebiche. These are other beings that have come consistently to teach knowledge and show them how to live correctly. And of course, we don't listen. We do everything wrong. But the depictions you see on TV of this black hooded, scary looking thing with a little dot white eyes, that is a Yebiche dancer. It's not a skinwalker that they're saying it is. Yes, it does look otherworldly, and we've actually put in our program that we put a picture of the Pope up and we say it's kind of like putting this picture up and saying this is Satan incarnate. And then we show a picture of all the cardinals and we say, and this is his demons, you know.
There are some that believe it's kind of similar.
Yeah, it's like saying, your gods are evil, and of course, depending on what denomination and what religion you are, that could be true.
Yeah.
We get very narrow-minded when we talk in terms of religion.
Every time somebody says denomination, I think $10 bill.
Right.
Because money and religion go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well, I find it really interesting because in the Pawnee religion, we talk about the creation story as we look to the constellations. And the constellation, the gods came down. Kirawat was the one who gave us the knowledge. And there were, the creation stories where the Navajos came from beneath the Stargate, what he was depicting. But they came directly down from the Palladius solar system and taught us how to set up our crops, our weather systems, how to design the community in such a way that resembled the star constellations. And what was really interesting last night, I was reading on the news that the Aurora Borealis could be seen on this side of the continent, even all the way here to Utah. And because of the cloud cover that the weather storming we're having here with snow and rain, I went out at midnight to see if I could see some of this illumination from the Aurora Borealis. And that's what we as Pawnee look to as being one of the gods, one of the messages, one of the signs. There are things there are messages to us as the people. Unfortunately, I was not able to see that, but that's kind of some of our lore that we've been given through creation stories, and it is a fascinating way how we were directed by those gods that we came from, So I'm sorry for the background noise. My neighbors are now mowing the lawn. I will mute.
It's usually Andrew who has a lawnmower in the back.
Yes, I have the curse of the 130 grass cutter.
Yeah. This is very unusual.
Passed on to my dear friend Michele Meiners.
They've timed it just right.
I remember earlier on my spiritual journey, I loved the story, and of course that's my belief too, about your ancestors coming from the stars. And then I read in a National Geographic magazine about you coming across, many natives coming across the Bering Straits, and I was like, it just didn't compute at all. It didn't never felt right to me. But I mean, that's the line they're always going to use, isn't it?
Well, I think it's archaeological evidence that they thought because of the Ice Age and then trying to line up the duration of when we migrated here. I think that one time there was one landmass. I think we did a lot of trade with the Middle East. I think we did things with the French nations that were, our ancient ancestors, that there's evidences of language, the Sumerian language that exists on some of our petroglyphs here in the West, on native lands, and if you're ever able to see it. But I saw the exact Sumerian writings in the Middle East when I was there about 3 years ago. So there's this interchange of language, there's this interchange of trade, interchange of migrations. That may have been all nations. I don't dispel that it was always indigenous. We could have been, like today we're migrating, people are migrating from state to state, and we don't take that into account, that's affecting our history of infrastructures, whether it's in commerce or politics, so on and so forth. It impacts the world, can impact a community and a people.
And if you were to lower the ocean levels 300 feet like it was during the 11,000 to 16,000 years ago, you would have what's called Donnerland. Basically, Britain was surrounded by lower lands. Donner Land would have stretched all the way
Mm.
to Iceland, and Iceland all the way into Quebec into Canada. And the ocean would have been much smaller. The ocean shelves, 12 to 15 to 25 miles off, would be considered beachfront property. Okay? 300 feet lower, that's where all of those societies had full interactive trade because the oceans were much smaller, the currents were much different. They could actually go there by land, and even they had great survivability skills when dealing with, traveling over large forms of ice because there were still many things that lived on the ice and under the ice that they could feed off of. And whale blubber to burn, never be cold.
I received an interesting archaeological magazine of a friend who's an archaeologist friend of mine. And now a gentleman from a tribe, which is the Ojibwe tribe, has said that their language ties into the Middle East. And they've done genetic markers that suggest that we have those genetics. And, when I went and visited the Middle East, that's what the Middle East, hierarchy was telling me is your sister. And some of their rituals and rites, I was out in the desert and they did a Navajo tea ceremony exactly the way we do it, except for they put these sheepskin robes over us. And I don't quite remember if we do that in our Navajo tea ceremony, but we may, and so I think that's where the misconstrued thing about the Asiatic nations were part of our bloodline. I think there was a lot of bloodlines that were intermixed during the ancient times.
Yes, the Cree Indians of northern Canada also their language, Cree language, is a form of Old Hebrew. I did a number of shows with Gerald Whitehorse Standing. I forgot back in early 2012, 2013, 2014, back in Wolf Spirit Radio days, and he would regularly come out and talk about the journeys the dancers from the Cree nations would do when they would go to Israel and have these dance exchanges too, where many of the traditional dances were virtually the same to the traditional dances of the Israelis. The language, I mean, to the point where you had regular rabbis visiting the different Cree nations to find the different dialects and to understand how the ancient language was enunciated and the various forms of enunciation. It was quite fascinating.
Yeah, we don't know what prehistory, I talked to a Cree Indian woman yesterday, and I learned some very fascinating things. And getting to the paranormal stuff a little bit about history of the Native Americans, our interactions with these. We didn't want to call them creatures or anything like that. We're talking about beings. Not only did we interact. What about the beings that came as a representation to each tribe? And she talked about the Bigfoot, Sasquatch in their nations and their belief systems around the Cree Nation. They talked about the little people, talked about the Bigfoot. And, she told me that they're direct in communication with these beings today and that they have a interdimensional presence. And she interacts with them. And it was very fascinating to find out that the things that they're being taught as a nation, her nation, is that they're very into healing through those practices, through interdimensional beings. And I found that really interesting too. And it's fascinating that community interact even to this day. And she was telling me about their personalities and who they were and what they represented and who they will come to, who they won't come to. So that interaction has been going on, she says, for decades and millennia. And and she says that's the connection that we have lost to some of our ancestral lines. I mean, we are the Paranormal Rangers. These are things that we're learning and want to learn. I mean, Navajo has the same teachings, and Stan has other bloodlines too that they teach these teachings as well.
So I believe as humans we are originally wired to have interdimensional communications. And right now, our spark plugs and wires are misaligned. It's a matter of changing the plugs and the wires, letting them go to the right place, and our engine of consciousness will naturally be able to flawlessly flow between this dimension and scores of other dimensions, as long as they don't compete with each other. And that's the nature of faith-based communication. There's not a competition between multiple forms of subject matter. We're a lot of people that are. I got my airplane going by. Sorry.
I hear the jet landing.
Yes. They're redirecting traffic again. Whenever we have these big storms come, they redirect the traffic over the airport. So in that non-hierarchical order, we're able to process the many different forms of interdimensional communication, like the Bigfoot energy. Okay, it's been prevalent in humanity when humanity was a high society. It's just not written the way you would expect. An example, you look at the Egyptian culture, they have many animorphs that have many different shapes and form. And there are many things that could look like a Bigfoot inside Egyptian society. Okay. The same with many, many others. Also, I believe Bigfoot have gone through an evolutionary journey where they have earned a shape-shifting format, meaning they don't just have a Bigfoot format, they have several other forms that they can change into.
You know, it's really interesting in my conversation, and I'm bringing this up for a very important reason. Today, I didn't realize those nations on the East Coast are dealing with people coming and trying to find this phenomena, and they're entering Native American lands without permission. And so she would like to preserve her nation because that is their belief systems, that they're in communication with this with this entity, you know, beings, and they highly regard them within the structure, the elders, so on and so forth, and their belief systems, and they interact. And they said now they're becoming less and less because they're finding that people who don't understand their relationships to that tribe up there in Canada and the East area, which they're prevalent, they're huge in numbers, is she was telling me that she would like to implement a protection for people not to come on the lands and hunt them. And that's what's occurring. I didn't know. That's kind of an awareness piece, that this is a violation of spiritual traditions and culture.
Yeah, where I live out right now is throughout the journey of Bigfoot sightings has always been the first or second tier of sightings. So the Great Salt Fork, it's a lake down in mid Ohio, right on the Pennsylvania border. That's where the highest numbers of sightings. It competes between there and Colorado, and I'm only about 90 miles away from that. And I've heard Bigfoot calls since I was very, very young. It's an unmistakable sound to me, to somebody that's grew up in an area. They regularly transit through this area, and they like to swim in the Great Lakes. They can swim across the lake in an hour and a half.
Wow,
You know,
powerful.
when we were working with the Navajo Nation Rangers, we had an unofficial no-shoot policy when it came to Bigfoot. And the reason we did that was not because, oh, let's save Bigfoot, you know, and because people were actually going out and saying, I want to go hunt it. I want to kill one and be famous and get a reward, you know, or whatever to have this body. And we had a department unofficial no shoot policy mainly because we didn't want one of our officers going out there seeing something in the forest, shooting it, and finding out it was a guy in a zippered Hollywood suit, you know, running around just scaring the neighbors or pranking somebody or having fun.
Or worse,
And
the shitstorm it would create if you did get one.
yeah, so, we said, no, don't do it unless it's attacking you or attacking somebody else. Uh, don't do it. And that's how it was. So, but, for Navajos out there, they would just say, leave it alone. Uh, let it do its thing. You do your thing, and, just don't bother it. So
So
Stan has actually investigated quite a number of Bigfoot cases. He could probably tell you about seeing one of them peeking at him around a tree.
that's great.
I think it was back in 2014. I was taking a picture of the new studio they were doing, and there was this little side window, and I didn't know what was there. And then everybody started blowing up the side window, and there's this Bigfoot standing outside the window.
I was about to say that, Andrew. I
Literally,
remember that. I remember
12
you
feet
showing.
from the window, yeah.
Well, I think each of
You
us
got a
have had
photo
an
as well.
experience.
Yeah, I have a full
Yeah.
photo of it, everything, yeah.
Yeah, I got one too. And but it's really interesting. As I was speaking with this Cree medicine, I'm going to call her medicine woman, even though maybe she's not an official, but the way she was talking about the healing aspect, it became such a positive conversation to what we were saying, our beliefs and their beliefs, based on experience. And so back maybe anciently, the Navajos had a different experience. And I asked her about in our Navajo belief system, if you stare at the eyes of a Bigfoot, you lose your mind to mind control. And she says that is absolutely what you want to do. Because they give you knowledge. Someone's trying to prevent you from not believing that, and I thought that was a really interesting answer to something that what we really make belief systems being in our history, and based on somebody else's experience, maybe something that happened anciently, just like today we are. I was telling her, I said, do people find you crazy because, your practices are this? And she goes, my own family thought I was crazy until they had their experiences, her brothers, her sisters. And I thought it was a really important conversation because I think because people don't have their own experiences, they tend to criticize what they don't know. And I think that's the loss of our history being moved to reservations, taking away our culture, our belief systems, trying to force us to forget that we are Native and not adopt another way or culture, which we're done forcefully. And I think sometimes, if these things are being restored, why are they being resisted by the very Native Americans who want to practice these things? And I think, again, it's just not being able to have those experiences, and believe it right away.
As well as the cultural appropriation that was forced upon the various aspects of their lineages that had to take on Christianity and wanted to have a dual belief system without being persecuted.
Mm-hmm.
Then it creates a whole different aspect of fear, non-fear, whole different aspect. It's not God versus it's a natural being. Growing up, I had all forms of things trying to communicate, and the only validation system that worked for me was the mental image of what it was, what its true image was. And if I didn't recognize its true image, it's not something that I would allow through a form of communication. And as this skill set evolved and evolved and evolved, it evolved to my natural belief, my natural faith growth too. And unfortunately, all cultures throughout the world have a retarded faith growth. One way or another, that growth of faith is going to have challenging subject matters that mar faith, damage faith, and we are forever in a cycle of repairing faith, losing faith, repairing faith, and losing faith,
Mm-hmm.
which makes it very difficult to maintain high frequency or interdimensional communications.
Yeah, according to Navajo medicine men, Bigfoot was contacted somewhere around the 1600s.
Mhm.
when the Spanish brought horses into the region, and Navajos obtained horses. And they said that they found one north of Gallup in a place called Coyote Canyon. And they roped it. They were using horsehair lariats that were braided. And they roped it, and they said that this thing sat down between the horses after it was roped. And when it sat down, the story is that it spoke to them in Navajo,
Hmm. Mhm.
and it told them, "If you will take me to Mesa Verde, I will not bother you again." So they rode with it all the way up to Mesa Verde, between them, and then they let it go up there. Uh, what's interesting to me about that story is that if they were looking at it in the eyes and it's projecting to them, they would hear it in their own language, um, as opposed to it being a verbal language.
Yes, very much for me too.
Now, there are stories of Bigfoot in the forest imitating the cry of a baby or of a woman calling or screaming. And so there's just so much confusion. There's so little that we know.
Mhm.
And, how do we expand that knowledge?
I want to add this. Humanity has its good, its bad, its neutral, and it's morally transient, meaning their morals change to whatever the times tell them to do. I think that can be fair said even in the Bigfoot communities. They will have those that are morally transient based off of the deeds done to them.
Mhm.
The application and the arrival of the white settlers who did terrible things to them and vengeance back. If we look back to the story of the two lions that are in the Chicago Museum, The Ghost in the Darkness, they killed like 300 humans before they were finally killed.
Right.
And lions never do that. They don't hunt for sport. Okay, they don't. Inevitably, if enough negative things are done to you, you're going to turn to another way. And I think today the populations of the Bigfoot have been reduced to such a level where the moral authority of non interference, do as much good as you can, has taken over their ideology. But there will always be those that don't see that ideology. Another thing can be said, there are things that are not Bigfoot that we might identify as Bigfoot. They're looked similar and maybe genetically similar, but they're culturally opposite. Native American cultures called them giants, all different sorts of aspects of things that would hunt humans and eat humans too. Inevitably, some of them have survived the many purges that has gone on.
We don't ever suggest that we're medicine people. Medicine, we live the medicine our entire lives. We're not taught about the intricacies. There are sacred events that occur in our sweats, and somebody was asking, what has the sweat lodges, are they different now as into the past? I wasn't in the past. I just know what I know today, and so that's the reason why the knowledge has to be retaught to those who are seeking those answers. And we don't, as rangers, look to ourselves as being the all in to all answers. We have to respect our elders within our councils. We respect the medicine men that are there too as well, and even our family members who have given us what they were taught. We have to respect that. And so when Jonathan speaks about Hollywood and its changes and our personification of who natives are, it's still being done. And I'm going to plug something in. It was really interesting. Lily Gladstone was the first Native American to be nominated for Killers of the Flower Moon. That is a historical record of what happened to the Osage Nation when it got into prosperity, oil and gas, and other people bottom feeding, wanting to acquire and trick the Native American culture, and by marrying with some of the women. So I'm not going to get on my platform, but Hollywood still doesn't recognize the Native American, because she should have won that Best Drama Actress award, because I mean, there's some great actors. I don't think Emma Stone should have not gone it, but these are the things people are seeking for: history. And that was a historical piece, very, very powerful, about Native Americans. And it was, at least by Scorsese, he recognized the interaction, that this history has to be told, even if it's at that level of Hollywood. So I think I've said enough.
Well, I think one thing is that as time goes on, it's like the shows that John, you, and I have been involved in as far as television production, that you do have representation by actual Native Americans.
Yes.
And we strive to portray or have representation of, from a Native American background, things that are accurate. There's times that John and I have refused to be a part of production simply because they want to exaggerate or make up things. And John and I have been very adamant about being, straightforward with those productions, that we're not going to do that. And so when you talk about the larger motion picture productions, you'll have a written storyline or story that they're developing into this visual image and portrayal of what was these historical events. And for me, when it comes to Native American history, the thing I have problem with is where you have non-natives saying, this is what your history is, this is what truly happened and stuff. It needs to be from an actual Native American perspective. It's a lot of these things we talk about, even in the podcast. Sometimes it can be hard to convey these ideas and thoughts that are native, that we are taught, that we have experienced, that are of a paranormal and supernatural nature, and conveying that into a non-native English speaking perspective. And although for us three that is what we've chosen to do, and I just think that we all have a responsibility that are involved with conveying information, whether it's in production or writing a book, even, to accurately convey to the best of our knowledge these things that we were taught, and not that it's based in the truth, that it's based in accurate information that we're aware of.
Yeah, I've heard individuals in the production industry. You guys need to get over yourselves. I know my ancestors did that to you. Get over yourselves and stop complaining that this was done to you, that was done to you. But we've never been able to express the traumas that were endured, and now we're sharing. That's why we won't share our knowledge of the sacred things that could spiritually heal a lot of people. And so natives have learned to do it in silence. and respect and honor. And so, like you gentlemen have turned down roles. I have turned down roles because I've, read scripts and I went, are you kidding me? That's who you think I represent. And, I'm not all about the fame and the fortune. I am about teaching things and knowledge that have been lost to mankind, because it's just not for the natives, it is for mankind. And so certain people are looking for answers today, because you can only live in the concrete world for so long when nature has so much to teach us. This earth, that's why we say Mother Earth is our mother and the Father Sky is our father. There's a reason. And so even religion, and I, don't want to disrespect religions, because they're there for a reason, but that's everybody's choice, whoever wants to practice certain religion. Creation really brings about a reverence, as we were talking earlier about the drum, the frequencies of a drum, how it can settle the heart. I'll let Jonathan share that, or if he'd like. If he doesn't, that's fine too. That sometimes when you get into a situation, there are processes through the Native American teachings and using our instruments that can heal ourselves. That's why natives do it, including the sweat. And I can't express the sweat process, because that's very sacred to us natives. There's a reason why we do it.
So there's a term that I learned a long time ago. For someone to reveal their sacred talk, there must be a sacred listener, hand in hand. And unfortunately, so many of the Western society have not the tool of sacred listening. Sacred listening is a neutral state where you're not judging the material before or after it. You're listening to it in a state of reverence that it
Mhm.
is wisdom. How that wisdom applies to you later is another point of view. That's after the sacred talk has been done. The sacred listening is a skill everyone must learn to master over and over again. And as you evolve into being a greater and greater listener, you can hear the subtleties of the wisdom and the words in between the words that give greater meaning of what the sacred talk is about.
Mhm.
So many.
One thing I would like to address, somebody's asking if there's a relationship between what is known as a skinwalker or a wolf man or a dog man. And, John and I have discussed this topic quite a bit. And uh, if you look at other phenomena like the Bigfoot, throughout the world, internationally, there are references to what is being described as a Bigfoot or Sasquatch. You have the Yowie in Australia and the Yeti and different cultural descriptions.
Mhm.
But with the Skinwalker, John and I and Michelle are aware of how people that practice certain things uh, within tribes that's related to witchcraft, and it involves the shape shifting, and there's a certain ritual and practice, and so there is the possibility that throughout the world there are people that have the ability to tap into certain uh, rituals and belief systems that allow for the more or less the shape shifting or changing from one form into another, like human form into an animal form. And so, from my viewpoint, I think that in a way these forms could be viewed as related. The rake, is a common phenomenon that people are seeing and recorded. And so, but I think John and I have been clear about within the Navajo culture that this thing that people refer to as a skinwalker that when people practice the ability to change form like that, it's only being done for one purpose, and that's for a negative purpose. To the intent is to end up causing harm or injury to another individual. And I would dare say that if you looked and really delved into the investigations and the data behind these things that where people are changing form, that it's primarily for a negative purpose. You know, they're not doing changing form and going out and doing good things for other people. It's done to either terrorize or to harm or cause injury. So in that respect, I think, yeah, there's probably a commonality or common relationship.
You know,
So
Stan, it
thank
was
you for the
interesting
question.
that it was a really good question, because I was told by a Native American leader that skinwalking was the form of changing the ability of for human form into an animal form, was for time travel and only time travel. There was a time in our Navajo history that it got corrupted, and
True.
so I'm
And that's
saying,
what I've learned too.
yeah,
That's exactly what
yeah,
I was.
and that now we instill fear into lore that has turned and been twisted around, but those were sacred among only the medicine man could do that type of time travel. And it probably took years, but there's always somebody in the crowd that always thinks they can do it better. And then, whatever the negative they put on it always sticks with the nation. We do not, as Native American, practice time travel in that way or skinwalking.
When
It's
it comes to shape shifting, I don't know if John would be willing to elaborate just a little bit on the contacts we made with individuals who
mhm.
advised they were practicing this and why they were doing it and that of that nature. If John
Yeah,
could.
the some of the people that we've talked to indicate to us there's absolutely nothing to do out here. You have no TV, you have no electricity, no running water, and that's probably 75% of the entire reservation is like that. And you're talking, close to 500,000 people that live on the Navajo on 37,000 square miles. So there's a lack of anything to do for a lot of these kids, and they get together. They want to have fun. They want to go, and just like any gang, you want to control territory, and so they change shape to go out and do this. Now there's different classifications of skinwalker. There's these amateur types that are learning how to do the change, but they're not learning any of the other stuff. There's another one that knows how to use plants and herbs to poison people. There's another one that's very, very deep into this, and it becomes a religion all in itself. And many people say that in order to gain this type of knowledge, you have to sacrifice somebody that you love dearly in your family to obtain this power. Uh, that's something that I don't think too many people are willing to do. Um, whether it's your brother, your sister, your parents, somebody is it, the key there is that somebody who is very, very dear to you. And then, you start learning this stuff. Now, once you're into it, there's no going back. You're in for life. If you leave, you're going to be hunted down and killed.
That's
So,
the procedure with some of these criminal gangs. Once you're in there for life. And if you try to get out, they will try to take your life too. So It's interesting.
So you have this situation, and then um, practitioners will, in the past, have dug up bodies of people that were buried and taken the jewelry and gone into the border towns and sell it. And we saw that recently with mining operations where they were disinterring graves. And suddenly there was an influx in the market of old jewelry where the turquoise were actually rattling in the bracelets and stuff. They were loose. That was because in the old days they used cardboard to back the turquoise. So when they dug it out of the ground and took it off the skeletal remains, they tried to sell it, but they didn't know how to tighten those things up. So uh, it's said that within Navajo culture, if you suddenly become very rich, and you're suspected of being a witch. Um, so there's a lot of different classifications of them, and some of these kids, they're learning how to affect the change. They told us that they do a ritual, and there's almost like a ceremony that they go through, and they have the skin of the animal with them. They're We think that they're using DNA from the hides to affect the change into that animal because it's always something. Um, Children are taught you don't leave your fingernail clippings, you don't leave your hair, you don't leave your defecation laying around because or sweaty clothes because a witch can get a hold of them and affecting a change that will appear to other people as you. And, that's how they can get close to people and deliver poisons. So this goes on and on. And we were told that this change happens, that there's a red shift in the spectrum. And suddenly you're able to run at impossibly fast speeds. Uh, I've had people tell me that they were followed by a person that appeared to be white, like painted white, running behind their car at 65 miles an hour. And that's a scary thought. In the middle of the night, all of a sudden hear bang on the side of your car, and something's running there right by your window. And they have to step on the gas and go about 100 miles an hour to get away from this thing. There's people today that will not drive on Navajo reservation roads at night because of this. You're told don't whistle at night because you're going to attract these things. Um, so there's a lot of information, but to let people know these are not to be looked for. They're not to, don't go out there with a camera and try to photograph them. They are extremely dangerous and they can kill you. Um, they can kill you directly. They can kill you indirectly through poisons and other things. They carry something called corpse powder that's made out of ground up bones and flesh and other poisons. And if they blow it your direction and you inhale it, we've seen a couple of people that have been poisoned, and the doctors can't tell what it is. They don't know how to treat it. One of our friends stayed sick for a year and a half, and it almost killed him several times. So it's nothing to laugh at. One description by Haas Lore was that he remembers laying on a bed, vomiting out one side, sweating buckets of sweat, and uh, defecating out the other side all at the same time. And his family literally dragged him out to a vehicle and drove over 100 miles to see a medicine man. And when the medicine man took him in, he says, "You've been poisoned by a skinwalker, and if you had waited another hour, you would have been dead." So, that's how serious this stuff is. Um, and he was able to give him medicines to bring him back. So, we don't advise anybody. We won't even go look at. We've had film crews come out and say, "Can we go look for them?" No, absolutely not. It's too dangerous. We've seen people affected, and we don't want that to happen to anybody. So, the people that we talked to, they said that the purpose that they used was to go terrorize communities because that was the fun thing to do. It's a sense of power that is given to them this way. And they said that along with the redshift, that there is your vision becomes blurry. And then here's another really interesting thing. They said you no longer think like a human. You become animalistic.
That's right.
And so you don't have conjugative thought as we talk about it. You're not thinking, you're not planning, you're just going out and being an animal and reacting.
And there's where some of them forget how to turn back to human and end up being the things that do some of the more negative things that might be attributed to a Bigfoot or something else that has a higher moral code. Um, like Dave Pallades talks about the missing people throughout the national parks. Clearly, there's something new, supernatural going on there, and they try to label it to one thing or to another. But I think there are many people who get caught into the power of shape shifting and can never turn back. And then they turn up to be a predatorial, energetic, shape shifting thing, constantly trying to regain its humanity that never can.
Yeah. There was a question that came up about what steps would you recommend um, for a non-native who's very interested in Native American spirituality. Uh, this question was asked to me at a conference, and I was on a panel discussion. And a young lady stood up and she says, "Should I start smudging?" And my response to her was that you have a cultural background. It doesn't matter who you are, you came from a culture somewhere. Go back in your culture and find out what they did, the things they did to protect themselves, and take that as your own and utilize it with some newer methods and capture that for yourself. It has more meaning that way. Um, don't just copy, um, another culture, but take the best of what you find. Research it, study it, and when it comes to things like smudging, we always tell people, please don't burn your house down. Uh, and don't come back to us and say, "Well, I tried what you told me and my house caught on fire." Um, when you're doing this stuff, you're playing with fire, you're playing with coals. Um, it can get dangerous. I've been to the point where I'm walking around with a cast iron miniature frying pan, and it's too hot to hold,
Mm-hmm.
and so I have to put on these silicone gloves to keep my hands safe. Um, if I'm walking through the house smoking rooms. So but really take this stuff, take the best of what you learn, find out in your cultural background what was done, and utilize it, and it'll have more meaning for you. Go
And
ahead.
one other thing that's critical in that is that when you go through these protective measures, procedures, even a ritual, would you could say, there has to be the intent within you of uh, with that being a uh, sacred thing that you're doing, and not just going through the measures. If you do that, it's not gonna have the desired effect you're needing or wanting with that. It has to be something that you in your mind um, uh, invoke or have the intent for protection, and or at times when you're reaching out to um, uh, ancestors or guardians or those protectors. There, it has to be within your heart and your mind to truly have an effect with those kind of things.
Jonathan,
When
you were talking about, having to use a cast iron pan. I've run into that myself many times. And I went to the dollar store and I got an old Chinese wok that had a great metal wooden handle on it. Solved all my problems. A $2 wok from the 1970s did everything. Never caught myself on fire, dripping, burning embers everywhere, because there are sometimes you have to give a spot extra time. And I
True.
want to bring this up. You were just talking about faith and intent. And I
Mhm.
like to break things down as baby step faith intent and adult intent. And an adult intent uses all of your comprehension wisdom about that subject matter and the density that's in a place. Baby steps allows others to lead them.
Okay.
When you're using that adult intent and you run into an area, I do my work here. All right, other people come here. You've got to start contemplating the volume of people who might be leaving what I call dust bunnies or Velcro energies or straight up toxic garbage.
Hmm.
And you've got to go through the list and a checklist and go, I have to neutralize these various subject matters. And I need a frequency and a vibration to do that, be it through prayer, the intent of prayer, or the action of repetition. Repetition does create an illumination when you do it enough times, and your adult intent is a part of the greater growth process. Years ago, I called it spiritual hygiene. Just as you would brush your teeth, vacuum your floors, and change your sheets, there are certain high spiritual hygiene things one must do for themselves on a regular basis and find what works and learn to be in that adult intent as much as possible and not allow yourself that baby intent where you're really not putting your real power behind it.
Andrew, you're speaking about safety measures. Really interesting. A while back, years ago, people were paying to do sweats, and be very cautious. People have lost their lives when done incorrectly.
True.
Uh,
That's right.
and if you're paying for a sweat, then you shouldn't be there, because this is not something. Spirituality is not something you pay for. It is there. There's not a tithe to it. It's just you raising your
It's it's
belief system in something that's greater than yourself, and we call it the creator.
right. It's different if you're doing donations for the wood and the property to keep things going versus going to a retreat that's going to do 3 sweats and you're paying X number of dollars to do the sweat based retreat.
Right.
Okay. Big difference.
Volunteering your time
Yeah.
to gather wood or chop it or bringing food
Or pay for the wood to be delivered.
or pay for the
Same
wood
concept.
gas.
Yeah.
Yes, we appreciate that donations.
The other thing too is growing up, we would go up into the mountain every summer and spend the entire summers there for as long as I can remember on Navajo.
Yeah.
And we had a small pond out back of the cabin, and next to the pond was a very small sweat house,
Hmm.
big enough for maybe 2 or 3 people. And taking a sweat was actually a way of taking a bath, back in the day. It wasn't this big thing where everybody got together and got in a teepee and all this stuff. Um, these are Native American church ceremonies.
Hmm.
Uh, but this was something that was done on a pretty regular basis, just in the normal home. And we find Hogan sites from the 20s and the 30s that have an associated sweat house with it, that are usually made out of cribbed up wood and almost in a teepee shape. with earth over the top, and then you go in there and there's a pit. Basically, it's a pit house, and you go in there and set up your rocks and pour water on them. And and here's another thing, safety wise, you get the wrong rocks and you pour water on hot rocks, they can explode. So
Yeah.
if you don't know what you're doing, you know, we don't want to see you with shrapnel wounds, you know, from from sitting naked in front of this thing and pouring water on on rocks that have been sitting in the fire. Uh, you have to be careful. You have to know what you're doing. Um, I don't know if anyone's ever seen that a stone that was in a fire that had water tossed on it, but they can explode violently in some cases. So safety is always the most important thing. Find somebody that knows what they're doing. Don't just go nilly willy into it. Um, and you know, like we said, you can kill yourself. You can uh, roast yourselves. You can get dehydrated. Um, so there's a whole bunch of things, you know, and alcohol and sweat does not mix.
No.
True.
Public service announcement. So
Well, guys, we've come to the end of the show. We've had a really, really fun time. I think we are going to be back next. Sorry, we will be back next Wednesday. Michele, you want to give everyone how to go to your website, everything that's going on over there?
Yes, go to the Paranormal Rangers and .com. Yes. And if you would like to get a hold of Laura at Two Feathers for the tour, contact her, as she indicated before. We are going to be in York, England in June, teaching about some of these methods and our culture, and exploring how to safely explore paranormal.
yeah, the Stan and between just me and Stan, we have 54 years of law enforcement experience. We've got 22 years combined of paranormal investigations. Michele has had numerous investigations where that she's been a part of. And so together we are the Paranormal Rangers, and we invite you to meet us.
I look forward to meeting all you new people that are listening to the shows. The Paranormal Ranger will be back next week on Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Central Time. All right, everybody, it's been a great show. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you for everybody that
Thank
participated.
you for participating.
Let's see you.